my speaker event for the community that can make it. Today we have Dr. Charles Morgan to talk to us about neuroscience and psychology and a whole gamut of things. Right now he is a professor of national security studies at the University of New Haven. His focus is teaching national security studies, domestic and international intelligence analysis, and issues in deception. Dr. Morgan is developing a concentration in the human aspects, intelligence analysis, and psychological operations arenas that are relevant to intelligence. He has a pretty robust background with military folks, doing research at SEER School, helping with selection processes for Special Operations Forces down at Fort Bragg, et cetera, et cetera. So, without further ado, I will hand it over.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. Actually, I was in the Navy. I wasn't Army, but I've done more work with the Army, I think, all these years than I ever did with the Navy. So what I would like to talk to you a little bit about today is something I was asked to do in 2010 and 2011. I was getting ready to leave over at the CIA, where I'd worked for a number of years, and the Intelligence Science Board said, could you give us a brief? What's in store for us in the future? So I told my boss at the time, I said, well, I think the best I'll do is make an estimate over what I think is going to happen in the next 5 years, given certain technologies that were being developed at the time. And this is a bit of an extension of that. I presented it to the SSG, and it was some information I think some people didn't know. I think it's good for people to be aware of what's going on out there. The one thing that makes predicting a little bit of the future easier when you look at biomedical science is that labs are working fairly systematically with overtly stated goals. So that's a little bit of what this is about. I was going to give you my thoughts on mind, body, and beyond, gene slicing, Dr. Ventnor's work, DNA encryption, and something about memory, that the past is not what it used to be. This is actually having one animal learn something and seeing and recording that activity and put it into the sensory cortex of the second animal, and that animal acquires the knowledge. From the human brain technology standpoint, you can attach the human brain to another human brain, you can direct motor activity, or you can send communication and information. Dr. Ventnor's work is, my view, the equivalent of the development of nuclear weapons, when you realize that he created life in a cell. He programmed yeast cells to produce anything he wanted. These can be inserted into you through the hypospray needles. You put in a specific gene slicing, you program what you like, you put it in the cell, and it can reproduce and make as much as you like. It sends a signal and tells which portion of the DNA should unwrap, unfold, and produce a product. Related to this is an idea called dreads. These are designer receptors that can be remotely controlled. You can create a cell, you can put it somewhere in the body, and you can remotely activate it. So you have the capacity to create any product, as long as you know the DNA sequence. You can insert it into a living system, and you can remotely control it. You can insert it into a living system, and you can remotely control it. It may affect the way you think, the way you act. So once you know that the technology is there to edit, splice, and program a cell, and the technology currently exists to administer it to somebody and have it go park anywhere you program it to go park, proliferate, and do its function, you can have things activated in other people's brains. These people have figured out how to hide imagery in the DNA of bacteria. You can have the information reproduced in a string form that was formed of a protein. The new way to hide information is going to be in DNA. This was the first experiment showing what imagery you can hide in bacteria. This is the latest. It's a GIF file. Well, this is what the Chinese are doing with DNA. Merging DNA systems with quantum computing would be really quite an amazing and both lethal threat. The next thing I wanted to mention to you is memory. Can we erase memory? Can we modify memory? Can we change memory? The short answer is yes, yes, yes. And what they're able to do back in 2008 with a primate is have it learn through trial and error that by thinking it can move a robotic arm. and feed itself. It didn't take too long for the neural interface issue to be resolved. Once people figured out you could implant electrodes on brain tissue and then take a biological signal and turn it into an electrical signal and amplify it. The natural segue then would be, if I can send motor function from a brain to a mechanical arm, is it possible to send motor functions from one human to another human? So I call it the possession experiment.
Now, do you know the phrase brain power? Well, it turns out that scientists at the University of Washington are trying to hone that power and transmit it to another brain. Researchers call it direct brain-to-brain communication, and they do it by passing a signal from one mind to the next, using the internet nonetheless.
You can watch the video, but essentially what's happening is when one person is playing the video game, they're not using their hands. They're simply looking at targets. What's going on in the other room is a transcranial magnetic stimulation device that creates a magnetic field that excites neurons. And it's the other man's hand that begins to move and hits the targets. So you've co-opted the portion of the body of another human, and then their hand can behave in the way that you want it to do, in the way that you want it to do. But the person on the receiving end described the sensation as rather odd. So I didn't know anything until I saw my hand beginning to move, and until I saw my hand beginning to move. And felt that it was something other. And its hand was moving, the hand could punch in a code, the hand could do a number of things. But the really fun part was that you're taking over somebody else's physical body, taking over somebody else's physical body with the mind of another human, with the mind of another human. So what do you think would be the next step? You follow medical research, you say you can make a robot move, you can make a human hand move. What would you do next? Say, wow, they're getting brains connected to run things. And I have to begin to think either like doctors or like security and intelligence people, right? Can you actually send and receive? Can you actually send and receive sensory information? Like the Matrix. Like the Matrix. The short answer is yes. Yes. So it took some learning trials, but not many. It took 75 between them to achieve an accuracy rate of over 85% in just training your rats for a little while in the cages. But this was a milestone because it was not simply using the motor cortex to run a device. This was actually having one animal learn something and seeing and recording that activity and put it into the sensory cortex of the second animal, and that animal acquires the knowledge. It is able to act on the knowledge from the experience for something it has not ever done. For something it has not ever done. What we do know is that DARPA did get permission for 500 operations to do deep brain electrode implants. I haven't published anything yet, but my guess is what you're looking at is human-human thought transference, and certainly in the open science world, that was published last month. Actually, the brain-to-brain transfer of sensory information in two humans. And they achieved a success rate of being right 85% of the time. 85% of the time. So you can attach one human brain to a device. You can attach the human brain to another human brain. You can direct motor activity, or you can send communication and information. But you could plug in somewhere else in the world and learn something or see something or have somebody acquire the information that you have, and you wouldn't have to carry a different device. So that's what people are doing. There's a whole world out there of biohacking. I don't know if you're aware of it, but you should be. So normally at the university we are well regulated by the federal laws about studying and experimenting on humans. There's a biohacking community that is not part of the official science community that is busy trying to attach hardware to humans, and they do it in their basements. They study up on how to do the surgeries, how to connect devices, how to put motherboards in people, and they may use it for some purposes like phishing, using RFID signals in their hands to take information from you. But there are some other interesting developments. When you start thinking about the fluidity of what you can do with your brain, they're experimenting with CE6 and giving people with eye drops night vision. for several hours, and the person receiving the light drops can see over 160 feet in the dark. So it's a lot easier to look through your own eyes than it is to put on nods. And it will be a short time before you get a better solution than we get from the biohacking community, but it could also be readily available to almost anybody on the planet, It's going to be harder to keep this under control than it is to keep the special lenses and night vision technology. So I think it's really important that people pay attention to this kind of thing, because that can give humans the natural ability for a while to see in the dark. So when you think about it, the possibility now is there to develop different kinds of devices. It could be perhaps used either by intelligence people or by people in the military to have an extra ability to be able to see through walls, to see heartbeats. We used to play with the 18 gigahertz microwave detectors where we could pick up heartbeats through anything but solid steel and water, but that could easily be a human who can see the unique heartbeat that's behind the wall over there that's thermal insensitive. So it doesn't have to be IR. It can be a number of things. Anything that you can co-op is theoretically now possible to adapt to human brain function. All you have to learn is the code. You have to train with it. The experiment that was just released this last month, as I said, demonstrated that people could transfer knowledge from one human to another. And I commented to a couple of my colleagues, and I said, I think right now the most direct application of that is going to be either covert communication or running drones. The set of experiments, I didn't have videos to show you, but there have been a series that have shown you can connect the human brain to a rat and control its motor movement and its tail. So you can have non-human animal drones. You can have the human brain probably run a regular drone at this point, but running a non-human drone, something like a cockroach or a rat, would be awesome. And now if you're watching the Olympics and you see the coordinated maze of drones, the software is now really readily available, where you could have hordes of little creatures that can gain access to facilities or move around in different places, all run by a person sitting in a booth. It's no more technically challenging once you do that than figuring out the logistics of how you're going to send your signal somewhere else in the world and how to protect that signal. But that's now. That's not in the future. So that I would recommend people becoming aware of that from the human drone technology standpoint. The second field that people may or may not be aware of, I always tell my students, so it wasn't around when they developed atomic weapons, but Dr. Ventnor's work is, my view, the equivalent of the development of nuclear weapons when you realize that he created life in a cell. Back in 2010. I don't know if people are familiar with his work, but this technology paired with something called CRISPR, which is like an editing software for genes, makes a number of things immediately available. What he did is he programmed yeast cells to produce anything he wanted. They can produce perfume, they can produce petroleum, they can produce any peptide, anything we program the DNA to do, and it's in the living cell. We program the DNA to do, and it's in the living cell. These can be inserted into you through the hypospray needles, almost like Dr. McCoy in Star Trek. Doing a hyperspray, it just blasts plasmids into your squamous cells. But Ventnor was able to do that, has the patent on the technology. But you can engineer anything. You can engineer a unique thing that would only kill one person in the world. That's how it's done. You put in a specific gene slicing, you program what you like, you put it in the cell, and it can reproduce and make as much as you like. For those of you who don't know, your DNA is usually all wrapped up in tight little coils. And so what we're doing is when we create plasmids and put them into cells, it sends a signal and tells which portion of the DNA should unwrap, unfold, and produce a product. But you can engineer anything. You can engineer a unique thing that would only kill one person in the world. That's how it's done.
Many years ago, like over decades ago, DARPA wanted to put chips in people's brains.
People don't know, DARPA is the technological development arm of the Pentagon.
Well, they do Black Ops.
Yeah.
So they wanted to put chips in RFIDs, like the ones that you see, the little grain of rice, in people's brains, but they didn't want to have to do surgery. So after many, many years, they came up with a gel and that would do the same thing. And it's very insidious, and I'll be describing it right now. They do that. This gel is called hydrogel or quantum dot. Bill Gates' quantum dot. So what will happen with the vaccine is you get it injected into you, and then it assembles. It's self-assembled.
But you can engineer anything. You can engineer a unique thing that would only kill one person in the world. That's how it's done.
And then it swarms through your body. There are 33 different classifications, and yes, the number is precise, with cultic meaning. 33 different classifications of robots, each with a different mission and a payload deployed into your body. They can swarm. This is scalable, and what scalable means is that it can target one cell in your body. It could target an organ. It could target you.
You can engineer a unique thing that would only kill one person in the world. That's how it's done.
It can target, let's say, everybody with blonde hair. It could target everyone in a particular country. It could target somebody of a particular faith belief. It is scalable, very flexible. So then what it does is these robots get it to cleave. So you've got your red blood cell here, and here's this symbio. And what it does is there's clamps. Some of these robots are clamps. Some are levers. Some have other functions. And what they do is they hold your cell until your cell is basically swallowed up by the symbio. I'm going to tell you the whole thing, then I'll go back and tell you another insidious thing about it. So then what it does is it swarms and it crosses your blood-brain barrier and it takes over your brain.
Related to this is an idea called dreads. These are designer receptors that can be remotely controlled. So think about it for a moment. You can create a designer receptor, you can create a cell, you can put it somewhere in the body, and you can remotely activate it when the brain is exposed to the right signal. Using this technology, people have been able to transfer memories from one fruit fly to another by signaling through a light stimulus into the retina. Right now, it's done by putting a substance into the body. That will actually activate the neuron in the way that you want it. So you have the capacity to create any product. As long as you know the DNA sequence, you can insert it into a living system, and you can remotely control it. The living system, and you can remotely control it. And you can remotely control it. And one of the challenges that we have is that when you create a cell and you put it in somebody's body, you have to figure out where you want it. What if you want it in their brain? Right? If you want it in their brain and you can't figure out, you don't want to do surgery to plant it in their brain, if I want a product produced in your brain that may affect the way you think, the way you act, one route to that is through stem cells. Here, a quick brush up on your biology. Stem cells are cells, they're called God cells. Call them God cells. They can turn into anything. They hold the potential, unlike other cells in your body, to become anything you want them to become. And they can go find their home in the body and park there and do the work that you'd like them to do. And park there and do the work that you'd like them to do. You can infuse them, and they will find their way into the brain. And they will find their way into the brain. So once you know that the technology is there to edit, splice, program a cell, and the technology currently exists to administer to somebody and have it go park anywhere you program it to go park, proliferate, and do its function, you can have things activated in other people's brains. So if you take these three key points, hopefully you can see it opens up a number of both alarming and exciting possibilities. A number of both alarming and exciting possibilities. can have the timed release of information on demand. Hopefully, when I mentioned the word CRISPR and word editing and creating molecules with CRISPR out of playing with DNA, some of you thought encryption and encoding. So DNA encryption, there were, I think, 8 articles published by China in the course of 3 years, in the last 3 years. And it's quite important. The coding system, DNA steganography, I'll just say the short story on this is people have figured out how to hide imagery in the DNA of bacteria, how to hide imagery in the DNA of bacteria, and when you phosphoresce the bacteria, you can discover the information, or you can have the